What are we doing when we try to color grade a video? We essentially change how bright it looks and how colorful it looks. So we handle light and then we handle color. In today's video, I'm going to show you every way that I know of getting perfect exposure and contrast for your images. This won't just be a generic YouTube tutorial. I'll tell you everything that goes through my mind as I teach you the right way and I apply the technique in front of you. If you're new to the channel, my name is Giuseppe and I started out as a broke videographer many years ago, but eventually I became a remote colorist. If you don't even know what that just means that I get paid just to do color grading. Now that you know who I am, let's learn. Everything you think you know about color grading is probably wrong because for the most part, YouTube tutorials suck. First things first, I do not ever want to see you changing your exposure like this. A lot of people on YouTube teach you to do this, to adjust exposure this way, but this is actually wrong. The first thing I always do is I create a new node with Alt-S and I name this EXP. Now, naming a node doesn't actually do anything, okay? I could name this whatever and it wouldn't do anything. So it's just one thing that I do to remind myself of what I did in that node, because when you grade a lot of shots and you kind of go back and you want to change something and you want to copy this and copy that, you lose track of what you're doing in a certain node. So I make sure I always give a name to the nodes, at least to the most important ones. So first thing I always do is always have an exposure node, and I'll show you how I adjust my exposure. Before I even adjust exposure, what I do is here, I use scopes, okay? You might be wondering, are scopes actually useful? The answer is yes, but not how people teach them to you. How you have probably learned scopes is probably wrong. The way you use scopes is in certain scenarios, you use them to help you understand what's going on with your image when your image is too overwhelming for you and you can't make decisions. So I'll tell you, I'll give you a beautiful concept and it'll really boost my credibility now and it'll give you a reason to trust me. The way our eyes perceive color is relative. So I'll give you an example to make my point very clear and simple. If you go out on a bright sunny day and you close your eyes and then you open them again a few seconds after, you're gonna see everything blue. Why? Because when you closed your eyes, everything was orange because the sun was hitting your eyelids. It's kind of like automatic white balance. Okay, I won't go into the science of it. Our eyes have 3 cones and they work this way, this way, this way. I won't go into the science of it. I just want to make my point clear. So we have relative vision. A lot of the times you start color grading and you get used to an image. Has that ever happened to you? Like you color grade something and it looks awesome. Then you turn your head and you watch something else for 30 minutes and then you come back to it and you're like, what is this? What is this trash? This happens a lot to my students. There have been times, there's a video on YouTube where I coach a student live and I tell him, hey, let's go back to your grade after we've watched the normalized clip with nothing applied to it. And the guy's like, whoa, I didn't realize it was this bad. But now that I've looked at the normal clip, and I see what I have done to it, whoa, it looks so bad. So this happens a lot. Now, you use scopes to protect yourself in that situation. So when I want to adjust my exposure to cut things short, before touching anything, I just make the node and I make sure that my scopes are set on waveform. I use the waveform, I don't use the parade, I don't use the histogram, I don't use any of that bullshit. The only useful one, don't listen to anybody else, the only useful one is waveform. Because it allows you to get a ton of detail of information with the vector scope. Vector scope is also very useful and it allows you to get information about your white balance in your exposure and your contrast as well. So it allows you to do a lot of things together and I find it really helpful. So what you want to do is this. A lot of people may have told you that you want to always max out your scopes to get good contrast. I do not do that shit. That is such bullshit advice. You do not want to follow that. Listen to me. Exposure, the way our image looks is relative. I can have an image that looks, and I'm going to explain to you what I'm doing in just a second. I just need to get this across so that you can understand me. I can have an image that looks like this. This can look totally fine. I can also have an image that looks like this, which is underexposed. This is also totally fine. It depends, the way your image is going to look depends on your video's purpose. Listen, there's essentially 2 types of people. We have the preset pirates and the color kings. Preset pirates are the guys you listen to when you go on YouTube because they tell you what? They tell you apply a lot. They tell you always max out your scopes. So they tell you to do this just because it looks nice. So always do that no matter what. They tell you to do some bullshit split toning technique like this. So they tell you to do these things and they don't ever explain why to you. Well, those guys are what we call preset pirates here on this channel. And we call them that because they're repeating the same advice that everybody else is repeating. And everybody else repeats the same advice because nobody on YouTube actually does color grading. Like, people on YouTube learn from people on YouTube, and those people on YouTube learn from the same people on YouTube that are learning from them. It's a fucking circle. It's circular reasoning. So that's why the information is always the same. That's why you can open different color grading tutorials from different people, and they're always going to say the same thing, apart from this channel. Because I do this for real. Like, I really, like, this is from an old project of mine that I was brought on as a colorist. So what you want to do is this: realize that there is no right or wrong in color grading. Do you agree with me? Like, think about it for a second. I'll let you think. Do you agree with the fact that color grading is a form of art? Yes, we're artists, because, I mean, I can say, hey, my favorite color is red. You can say your favorite color is yellow. Does that make yellow better than red, or red better than yellow? I don't think it does. So there's no objective right or wrong. It's just subjective reasoning. Now, if you want to have a sad look, if it needs to be dramatic, well, then you can go right or wrong. If it's colorful, it's not going to be dramatic. What I am trying to make you understand is that exposure is relative. You need to ask yourself, how bright do I want things to look? At the end of the day, color grading is just that: light and color. How bright do I want the image to be? How colorful do I want the image to be? That's it. Do not overcomplicate color grading. Because if you overcomplicate color grading, that's when you get fucked. What I always ask myself before going forward with anything, really, not just exposure, but anything, is, what is my video's purpose? What am I trying to achieve? Like, does this need to be a happy video? Like, think for a second. Would this make sense for a sad video? Like, if I had colors that are really bright and, I don't know, the image looks like this, and sorry, if I have an image that looks like this, like, think for a second, would this make sense for a sad video? It wouldn't. So if your video needs to be sad, let's say, and very serious, you can have something that looks like this, let's say, that doesn't have a lot of colors and has a different look than what we had before. So with exposure, it's essentially the same thing. You need to think about what you're trying to convey, and then you translate that into colors. Practically, the way I adjust my exposure is this. I create a node, as I told you, name it EXP, then I go to my HDR wheels. Why do I do that? People have asked me this, and it amazes me how many people don't know about this stuff. So when you work, as I'm working right now, with 2 CSTs, if you don't know what these two are doing, just go watch some of my other guides on this channel if you're a total beginner, or if you want, like, the step-by-step program, just go check out the top link in the description. So what you want to do is this. Instead of doing what everybody else tells you to do, you create 2 CSTs where you convert your footage. You have your log go and become Davinci White Gamut and Davinci Intermediate. Then you do your grading in the middle. And at the end, you have Davinci Intermediate become Rec 709. You basically normalize the clip again. Stick with me. Even if you don't know what I'm talking about, stick with me. What you do is this. When you want to work on your exposure, you don't adjust your gain and you lift. This is wrong. You're not working on your exposure, bro. You're working on your contrast. So make a fucking contrast node where you do that. Like, the amount of people that do this amazes me. Like, people name this exposure, then go ahead, have fucking 50 nodes, then add an S-curve for some fucking reason. This is still like S-curve, this is a contrast thing. Then they go, and they have another node which is named contrast, and in the contrast node they do this. And they fucking ruin their image. So they do like the same thing 3 times in different places for no fucking reason. I could have understood that if there was a legit reason, but most people don't have a reason because they don't know what they're talking about. So exposure is not that. What I want you to do when you change your exposure, it should basically look like you're raising or lowering your camera ISO. That's it. And you agree with me. Like, that's usually what you do when you change your exposure in camera. You agree with the fact that, hey, I'm just changing how bright it is. I'm not changing contrast. So the only way you can do that, the best way you can do that is with HDR wheels, and you use the global one. I teach this in my Color Kings Academy, where I have courses about this stuff. I talk about this in depth. I want you to use this. Some guy once asked me, hey, why don't we use, if you're a bit more advanced, why don't we use linear gamma and we use gain this way to adjust exposure? This is a great question. Linear gain, if you're advanced. If you're not advanced, just stick with me. Don't worry if you don't understand this. But linear gain does the same thing that the global HDR color wheel does, I prefer this anyways because you have clear values that you can type in. So you can have like one stop in exposure right here, whereas you couldn't do that with the linear gain because gain doesn't have like stops. It's not the same thing. So while I adjust my exposure, I think of how bright the image should be, and I also double check with my scopes. Let's say that I'm making a mistake and my screen is very bright. If my screen is very bright, I will be drawn towards a lower exposure because my screen is bright, not because my image is itself very bright. So the scopes help you in that situation. Now, I make sure that this doesn't happen to me. You see me with the cyan background. This is just for videos. I don't usually color grade like this. So what you want to do, as I told you, look at your image, look at your scopes, and you do this. Now, the way you handle contrast is different. So let's say that I want my image to be fairly bright, like right here, okay? And this is actually very close to original exposure. When I try to adjust exposure, I try to keep an eye out for something in my image that I want to be of a certain brightness. Let's say that it's the sky or it's his jeans, okay? So I look at it, and I keep raising or lowering exposure until I'm happy with it. Sometimes you might find that you don't actually change exposure that much. When I usually change exposure, I don't necessarily look at how much I'm raising or lowering it because it's not actually useful. You don't want to be one of those guys that feels good about their color grading only if they're changing things. Like maybe your image has the right exposure from the get-go and you don't actually need to change anything. Because listen, you do not want to be a preset pirate. You want to be a color king. A color king doesn't give a fuck about applying the same technique over and over and over again if it doesn't get him anywhere. So the way you want to grade is to grade only if it's getting you somewhere. So a lot of the times I don't even look at how much I'm raising or lowering exposure. And sometimes, as you saw before, I end up having an exposure that is very similar to what the camera originally recorded with. So that's not a mistake on my end. That speaks about the fact that the image was exposed properly to begin with and is congruent with the grade that I want to craft for that image. Now, let's say that I've decided that the image should look like this instead. The second thing that I do is I create a contrast node. Now, I call it cont just to remind myself of what I'm doing. This is the contrast node. And there's different ways that you can handle contrast. Now, here you can do what you were doing before. So you can go with your lift, with your gamma, and with your gain. I'm going to explain to you briefly how I would use them and in what purpose do they serve and all that good stuff. So lift, gamma, gain, they really affect shadow, midtone, highlight, but you already know that. Now, they are, if you come from Premiere, let's say, they're a bit different from what you're used to because they are very broad. And you might have the question like, Giuseppe, but why are they broad exactly? Like, why did the people that made Davinci make them so broad? Like, I just want to affect my shadows like I do on Lightroom, for example, in Photoshop. Well, the reason for that is that since when we work on videos, we're working with things that move. So the light changes, and also we don't have as much data as we have with pictures. You need to be way broader to have a look that doesn't fall apart. I'm going to show you what I mean. So there are tools that are more narrow. These are those tools. And if I just select my black point, as you can see, the image can start looking a little wonky. I'll show you. Yeah, do you see this? So if with video we have very narrow tools, it doesn't work that well. So this is the reason why these tools are broad in the first place. Now, usually, me personally, what I do, I build my contrast, not with contrast and pivot. I do not like it at all. I don't like it. I like to build my contrast from the ground, basically. I like to build things myself. I don't like contrast and pivot. I always try to attack lift, gamma, gain first. I'll give you a practical demonstration. Usually, if you want to make the image heavier, you bring your shadows down. And if you want to keep making it heavy, you can bring your gamma down. Now, do you see how crushed this is? Like, I don't like the fact that this is too crushed. So if you want to have like a heavy look without having it too crushed, one thing that you can do is go on your curves. I'm just giving you an example. I'll explain this properly in a second. You can come right here, use what I teach in my school. This is called shadow shaping. And you can make your blacks softer. Okay, there's different methods for this. So what did I do? I craft my look with my lift, gamma, gain. I didn't use the gain in this example. And then I try to hone in on what I'm doing with my curves. So I use the curves. You see people applying an S-curve? Do you know what this does? This is the S-curve essentially just does this. this is the S-curve, basically. Like if you watch the vector, the waveform, the way it stretches out, this is the same thing as having an S-curve. If I reset this, and you see like this, I'm stretching it out just as you've seen it do, like just as contrast and pivot. So the only reason I ever use my curves usually is just to, you know, when you already have 80% of your contrast and you want to get to that 20%, the one that makes all the difference, you use your curves because it's way more targeted and you have a lot of freedom with it. But I don't usually go like this. I don't like it. You can certainly use it. It's just, it's too slow for me. So I like having just 3 knobs that I can twist and turn, and that's it. Now, you can use curves so you can make points. You can hold Alt on your keyboard or Option if you're a Mac. And if you hold it, you press and hold it, and then you click a point and you stay around the middle. Do you see how it kind of sticks to it? So it allows you to make a point that doesn't, you know, if you make it freely, you see how it doesn't stick? You can be sure that you're not actually changing your contrast ratio as you prepare your custom curves, basically. You have also highlights and shadows. If you're wondering about them, they're really just extensions of gain and lift. Okay, view them as like that. And they are a little more targeted. So if you really want to handle like the very top part of your image, highlights goes even further than gain, and shadows goes even lower than lift usually. And they're a little more narrow than lift and gain. I use them from time to time. They're not, you can get away without using them. They're really situational. I'm just trying to show you the tools that I use and how I use them. So I told you before that if you click this button right here, your wheels change, they change name, and they become something else. So before we were working with the color wheels. Right now, if I click here, we're working with the log wheels, which are very similar. The only thing that changes is the way they interact with the clip, in the sense that they are more narrow, and you can tell them how narrow you want them to be. So let's take what is now called shadow, for example. If I do something with it, you can see that we are just affecting the lower part of our image. You can also see that in the waveform. Like you see how helpful the waveform is. Now it's helpful for me because I'm demonstrating concepts to you, but the same thing applies for when you want to work on your image and you want to look at what your information is doing as you change things. I don't usually use midtone and highlights. I almost never find myself wanting to use them, but that might just be a bias. What I usually do is I handle my contrast right here. So let's say I want to make my image dark. Then I switch to my log wheels and I bring my black point up, which is kind of the same thing that I did with my custom curves before. Now, notice that, like, I want to get something out of your head now. You don't really need to use lift gamma gain all the time. You know that, right? Like, you don't need to use tools just because you want to call yourself a colorist or because you want to say that you're doing color grading on your footage. No. So a lot of the times, I remember I used to grade and I would fucking destroy my footage just because I wanted to use every tool available to me, but that's not the way to go. So what you want to do, like, if you're actually happy with your clip as it is now, let's say, this is actually like, okay, you can not use gamma and gain. Nobody's coming to bite you. So that's one thing that I wanted to get out there, because I feel like a lot of beginners feel this pressure when you see the Davinci interface and it's really complex and has a lot of tools, and you feel like you have to use every one of them, but it's just wrong. That's not the way you want to go. So let me take that pressure off of you. And another thing, I want to give you a good trick. So I talk about this in my, again, top link in the description, Color Kings Academy. Make sure that you're converting your clip properly. So the thing that I've showed you with the exposure, so with the HDR wheels, it works only if you have these 2 CSTs and they convert your footage from your log to Davinci White Gamut and Davinci Intermediate. And then they convert it from Davinci White Gamut and Davinci Intermediate to, in this case, it was sRGB, but you can have it Direct 709. There's a very small difference. It almost makes no difference. Don't pay attention to that. And in this case, it's Gamma 2.4. So what I've showed you with the exposure node, especially the exposure node, it works only if you have these 2 CSTs. It doesn't work if you don't have these 2. A lot of people have probably showed you how to increase exposure with a different method, and that is using offset. This is also wrong. So you don't want to use offset. Don't ever do that again. Use, as I showed you, HDR wheels, global, go right here. You're golden, okay? So do not use lift gamma gain and call it exposure. No, you're already messing with contrast. And do not ever use the offset for this purpose. It's not what you use offset for. As you can see, like, I'll give you, like, I'll have a quick test. So if I increase my exposure this way and then I make a new version, I reset this and I increase it this way. Okay, hold on. Look at the difference. So this is offset. This is HDR wheels. Offset, HDR, offset, HDR. Now, what do I want you to do? Use global HDR wheel. Don't use shadow. I've seen somebody do this and call it exposure. No, this is contrast. Already, you're already handling contrast. So one of your questions might be, okay, Giuseppe, but why do you stress out so much about handling exposure without messing with contrast? That's a beautiful question. When you have a lot of shots and maybe you use multiple cameras, or if it's not your case, if you don't use multiple cameras for your work, but you just have multiple shots, or let's say that you shot during sunset and the sun started going down. When conditions vary, okay, when they start to differ, you want to be able to have a node that you can just point towards and you can just raise it or lower it. That's it. That's why I use a separate exposure node always, every time. Sometimes, as I told you, you don't need to actually change the exposure. A lot of times, if you go watch some other guide on my channel, you'll see that I might also leave it empty, just as a placeholder, because I felt that the exposure was great, we didn't need to change anything, and it was just good to go. So do not stress about it. So to recap, I always have exposure like this, an exposure node, HDR global wheel, then Alt S, so in serial order, I have a contrast node, where I handle first lift gamma gain, and I decide if I like the shot or not. So I play with them until I like the shot. If I need to, I use the shadows and highlight slider, mostly the highlight slider if I have to recover a poorly exposed sky. So I usually do that. So the technique I use is basically go down on highlights and come up on gain. Usually it allows you to recover, yeah, see? So the sky kinda, so if I really match it, yeah, do you see how the image kinda stays the same? Let me actually match it. Yeah, the contrast changes a little and you're able to bring down the sky just a bit without having the whole image get darker, and it looks like this. So you see it in front of you. So I usually use highlights this way. This is a very cool trick. And what I also do if I need to go all in and I need to really dial in something, I use the log wheels, or if I want to be a psychopath, I just go with my curves. Okay, I never do this. I've never done it. I hate everybody that does this. Really, it makes no fucking sense to me. If you really want to have a nest curve, bro, just go use your contrast at least. Like, that's the only reason I would use a contrast slider for. I'm being honest with you. So this is what I do. There might be, I'll give you a gold nugget if you're watching until this point. So there might be some point where you want to recover your sky, and the trick that I just showed you, the highlights trick, doesn't work. That's when you do Alt P or Option P on your Mac, and you create a parallel node. You call this high rec, like this. In this, you're going to use this node just to recover highlights. Now, the way I do this, I teach this in some other guide, or I teach this really extensively in my school. Again, top link in the description. The way you recover highlights when you burn them, when you have a really overexposed something, is you go to the HDR wheels, and only in this node, okay? Not for the normal contrast. I almost never use HDR wheels for the normal contrast node. I always use lift gamma gain. Not that you can't use HDR wheels, it's just that, I don't know, I don't really feel a need for them. So in this node only, you go HDR wheels, you hit this button right here, and it says highlight. What you want to do now is this. When you're working with HDR wheels, you can set them up like we did for the log wheels. The log wheels, I don't think I showed you actually. So when you're right here in the log wheels, you have a range. It goes downward or upward. This tells Davinci what to consider a shadow or highlight. So you can tell Davinci, hey, when I make everything go dark, I actually want to grab some of the midtones, or I just want to grab the black point. Okay, see how this works? Beautiful. Now, when you want to recover a sky, and I told you go to the HDR wheels, you hit the button right there until highlight pops up. When highlight pops up, you hit this and you hold it. Nothing is happening right now. Don't worry about it. Once you've pressed it once, you can also do this. You hit Shift H, and now we go back to the gray image. What this is doing, we are asking Davinci, hey Davinci, can you show me what is in the highlight range? So what do you consider highlight right now, Davinci? And Davinci is telling me, nothing, bud. It's all gray. I don't see highlights in this node. So I'm going to go and I'm going to tell Davinci, hey Davinci, actually, I want you to consider highlights, everything right here, by dragging this down. So this is a threshold. Now, you might be, you might be wondering, okay, how do I feather this? So how do I make the transition smooth, or how do I make the transition harsher? First, if you also hit this button, you can visualize what's happening. So see, literally, this is what we're telling Davinci. Okay, this is kind of like the custom curves, but we're using color wheels basically. So the feathering, as you can see, if I up this other slider, the feathering increases. If I decrease it, it decreases. So you can use this to make decisions about what you should do with your HDR wheel. I usually use this just on the brightest parts, like these, for example, with a very, like a harsh feather. So I don't usually go like this for this slider. I don't need it. I keep it harsh. I hit Shift H again to go back out, and then we have the exposure right here, and I hit my exposure and I play with my slider. And as you can see, when you play with it, you can make things brighter or you can make things darker. For now, just know this. So this was a little extra gold nugget. For now, just know this. Every time you work on something, make 2 nodes, and you call the first one EXP, the second one cont for contrast, and you handle them just as I showed to you. This approach will give you a solid foundation from which to build upon for every grade that you end up doing on your clips. Again, if you're interested, top link in the description takes you to my online Color Kings Academy. I'll see you there. God bless you.